What's up guys, Justin here with TheRenderingEssentials.com, back with another Unreal Engine tutorial for you. So in this video we're going to do kind of an introduction to lighting in Unreal Engine. We will get more in depth with some of these concepts a little bit later, but for right now I wanted to give you a general idea of a few of the different light types, kind of what they do, how they work, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so to start off, this is kind of an example file that I've been working on using Unreal Engine, and I've kind of been walking through one of the tutorials that they have, and I will see if I can track down the link. It does a really good job of teaching how to build this stuff inside Unreal Engine. And so I wanted to start off with this one and then also move into a SketchUp model that I've brought in using Datasmith to demonstrate some of the more interiors. But to start off, I wanted to talk about the different kinds of lights within Unreal Engine. And so if you go over into your modes section on the left hand side and you go into lights, you're going to see a few different kinds of lights in here. And so specifically in this case, I want to start off and I want to talk about the directional light. And if you remember, a directional light gets brought in whenever you create a new level. So if I was to do a new level and I was to bring in the default value, then this would bring in, I want to say it brings in a skylight, it brings in a sky around the outside, it brings in some volumetric fog, it also brings in this directional light. And the reason we want to focus on this directional light is because that's what's affecting the shadows that are being cast on the inside of our model. So if you look right here, if I was to fly into this model, for example, you can see how that light is actually being reflected off of the floor. So that, at the moment, in addition to this point light that I have in here that we'll talk about a little bit later, is kind of affecting the lighting within this particular model. And one of the things to note about that, or this particular level, and one of the things to note about that is you can actually rotate and adjust that to adjust the way the shadows are cast. What I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to go to my kind of windowed mode so that we can kind of take a look at this and you can see kind of what's changing. And so in this case, if I was to click on this directional light item, I can come in here and if I fly into it and I look at it, you can see how right now it's set up with this little arrow coming off of it. Well, the little arrow right here is indicating what direction the light is shining. And so what that's doing is that's affecting the shadows that are being cast. So right now this light is shining through these windows, casting these shadows. Well, you can adjust the way that that works within Unreal Engine by moving and changing that light around. And so what we're going to do in this case is we'll kind of set this lower right hand view up so you can kind of see what's happening. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to rotate this light. And so when I rotate this light, you can see how my shadows are adjusting in the lower right hand corner. Maybe I'll just go back to my full windowed view. But if I come in here and I rotate this and I change the direction this is facing, that's going to affect the way that the light is being cast and the way those shadows look inside this level. And you'll notice I have kind of a skylight in here, so some of that's shining through the roof, and then it's shining in through the different windows, so you can affect kind of the way that this is rotated in order to affect the way that the lighting's going to look within your level. And so in this case, note that when you look over to this back side, you can see how it's kind of calculated the way that your shadows are going to look in here, but like kind of preliminarily. But you'll note that the way these shadows are being cast right now, the word preview is all over the place. That's because you need to come in here and you need to build your levels. And basically what that means is that's going to pre-compute your lighting data. So it's going to come in here and it's going to calculate what this lighting needs to look like. So right now we've got kind of the preview shadows in here, but if you come up here and you click the build button, what that's going to do is that's actually going to calculate all of this. And I'm not 100% sure. I know this is calculating the way this is going to look based on everything it's set as static. I'm not 100% sure if this is calculating on the things that are movable or not, but you can see how that lighting has now changed and it's recalculated based on that new location. So when you build your lighting, it's going to come in here and it's going to pre-calculate the way that lighting is going to bounce off of all of these different materials and stuff like that. So that's And one other thing I want to note is really, if you look at this, if you turn your light source off, your model is still lit. What your light source is doing is it's shining a direct light and it's casting these shadows. You do still have some lighting coming in from the way that the atmospheric fog is working, and I think from your sky sphere as well. We're not going to get into those right now, but that'll just kind of give you an idea of the way that works. So now I want to talk about some of the interior lighting options that you have, specifically the point light, spotlight, and rectangle light. And to do that, I'm going to go into another level. So in this case, I'm just bringing in a level that I've created using SketchUp, and then I've imported using Datasmith. And specifically in this case, what I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and build this lighting, and you're going to note that this is going to be a lot dimmer. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about dealing with that right now, but basically what we want to do is I want this to be a little bit dimmer so that I can demonstrate some of the interior lighting. And so the first kind of interior lighting that I have in here is a point light. And so if I drag a point light in here, you can see how basically what that's doing is that is calculating all of the different shadows, or that's affecting all the different shadows inside this space. You can see how as I move that around, those shadows are, at least as a preview, being calculated. So this light is basically shining inside your level based on this point, and it's radiating out in all the different directions. And so basically that's just a point in space where the light is going to radiate out. And there's a few things you can affect in here, like you can click and drag to affect the intensity of that light. So you can turn the intensity up, you can turn the intensity down using this slider. You can also come in here and adjust the color that the light is going to cast. So let's say maybe you wanted this to be a little bit more of a yellow color or something like that. You could come in here and you could adjust this using the color picker. So the attenuation radius is going to affect how far out from the point the lighting is going to affect everything within your level. So the smaller you make this, you can see how the less this light is radiating out and affecting different things. So you can adjust that. And one good thing about this is if you don't want this, for example, to affect things in other rooms or anything like that, you can kind of adjust this down so that it's not having to calculate all this extra stuff outside of that. So you can affect your attenuation radius by doing that. In this case, obviously we want that to be a little bit brighter so that it kind of fills this space. So there's a couple other settings in here I'm not really going to talk about right now with the source and the soft source radius. One thing to note if you go down below though is there's a couple options in here for effects world as well as cast shadows. And so basically what those are going to do is if you turn off effects world, then that's not actually going to affect anything within your world. So if you want to just turn it off, you can turn off effects world. And then if you don't want this to cast shadows, if you just want it to kind of light the space, but you don't want all of those shadows to be in here, you can turn that off as well. So that's kind of a point light. The next kind of light I want to talk about is let's go ahead and bring in a spotlight. And so a spotlight is another kind of light that you can use in Unreal Engine, but the difference between the point light and the spotlight is the spotlight has a direction. So you can see how this has kind of this cone shape in here. The cone shape is showing you what direction that light is facing. So a lot of the basics are the same. You can still change the intensity as well as the light color and the attenuation radius. What's different with the spotlight is you can affect the cone of light that's created from the light. So like for example, what this is going to do is this is going to have an inner cone and an outer cone. And so you can adjust those to adjust how far out your light is going to affect your space. And so you can see how if you drag your inner cone all the way to the outer cone length, basically what that does is that takes this whole edge that this is casting and it makes it very defined. So you can see how if your inner cone and your outer cone are the same, there's no really like gray area in there. So it's just like a very hard circle of light. However, as the outer cone gets in here, you can see how your brightness kind of goes down as you go out. So you can adjust the way the light falls off between the inner cone and the outer cone radius. And then you've got kind of the same options in here for casting shadows and different things like that. And then the last light I really want to talk about in this video is a rectangle light. And so what a rectangle light is going to do is you're going to bring that in, and it's basically as if you had a rectangular face that was shining in this direction, or a rectangular light that was shining in this direction. So if you look at this, you can see how only the stuff on the front side of this light is being lit by this light. So there's no lighting being cast on the back side. You can see how this line, and I'll go ahead and delete out my spotlight, you can see how this line is very defined on what direction this is going. And you could do some interesting things with this. So you could probably place this outside your windows, for example, to simulate a little bit more lighting coming in. I'm not sure if that's a generally accepted practice or not, but like, let's say for example I was to drag this up, you can see how you could use this to get more lighting coming in from your exterior window. We could also use this if we were to come in here and rotate it. You could use this to cast light on an individual object. So this would probably be useful if you were doing more like product type renderings or that kind of thing. But you can see how that lighting is in here, and you can use this to cast light in a certain direction without having the cone function of the spotlight. And so note that in the same way, when you do something like this, your lighting needs, or your lighting needs to be rebuilt to pre-calculate those shadows. So to really get those shadows in here the way that they would more realistically be, you need to come in here and calculate that. And you can see how when you calculate that, this space is actually lit different because this lighting is starting to bounce a little bit more and be a little bit more realistic. And so practically speaking, and we'll go ahead and take our lighting out of this space for right now, but practically speaking, one way that you could use this is if you were to bring in something like, let's say for example you had like this hanging ceiling lamp that comes with the starter content. What you would do is you would come in here and you would actually place a point light or a spotlight inside that light in order to more realistically cast light. So basically what you would do is you would use the geometry of the actor inside Unreal Engine in conjunction with a light. And I think that you could come in here and you could probably group those two together. So you could take your spotlight and your ceiling light, and you could right click and you could group them. So you could make them a part of a group so that when you move one, you move the other as well. So now they're kind of tied together and you can move that around. So what you could do is this would be in here and these things would be kind of locked together, and then if you ever wanted to edit your light, you could just come in here and right click and go down to your groups and click unlock, and then you can edit one of them individually. Just remember to go back in and relock them when you're done so that they're tied together. So we'll just come in here and rebuild our lighting one more time. Leave a comment below, let me know what you thought. Is this helpful to you? Is this how you're using lighting in Unreal Engine? I just love having that conversation with you guys. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new content every week. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.